It's me, Mario! Hello!
Depending on how old you are, you'll likely associate that clip with a feeling of excitement as a prelude to a magical and whimsical journey into the land of the Mushroom Kingdom. Over 30 years ago, Super Mario 64 released and was the herald of a new age of gaming. Surely, after all this time, it must have become archaic. Let's find out, is Super Mario 64 really as good as you remember? First in June in Japan and September in North America, 1996 saw the release of Nintendo's new generation console, the Nintendo 64. Leaving behind the 2D sprite-based games of the Super Nintendo, but not the cartridges used for those prices. The Nintendo 64 promised a future full of 3D rendered worlds, vast exploration, and pure fun. Alongside the console, Nintendo released their spokesperson for 3D gaming, Super Mario 64. Now, 3D games existed before the release of Super Mario 64 in 1996, but 3D games as we reference them today when we say 3D games, for all intents, began with Super Mario 64. The game was a revolution, setting a new standard out the gate for what players could expect out of a 3D game. It would sort of become the calling card of the Nintendo 64, where the Sony PlayStation inherited the expansive RPGs from the Super Nintendo with games like the PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy trilogy. The N64 got titles about jumping, exploring, and adventuring in a 3D space. Now, becoming a trendsetter all those years ago is great. Reaching sales milestones of over 12 million copies is also quite impressive. But over 30 years later, what's it actually like playing Super Mario 64 today? Coming from somebody who grew up with the game and who replays it almost yearly, it's still as magical as it was when it taught me how to think about 3D gaming. It's breezy too. How Long to Beat clocks it at about 12 hours to run through the main story, but as someone familiar with the game, I've absolutely finished the final Bowser fight in under 10 hours. For newcomers, there has been a conversation surrounding Mario 64 in recent times as the game being outdated, overrated, or surpassed by a newer title. Because surely, a game that looks like this and was a pioneer of 3D gaming can't be as fulfilling or feel as good to play as a game like Super Mario Odyssey or Astro Bot. Right? Here's the thing about Super Mario 64. The language the game invented about how to move, run, jump, collect your way through a variety of diverse stages, and really how you interpret and think about a digital 3D space, the running, jumping, and movement of almost every 3D game still follows the same logic that Super Mario 64 came up with. So inherently, I would say that it's kind of hard for this game to feel outdated. From the moment you take your first steps in the game, you're greeted by Lakitu of the Lakitu Brothers. One of the few direct tutorials you'll see in the game, this charming fellow comes down on a cloud to greet Mario and contextualizes to the player why they're looking at Mario from behind his back, rather than on a 2D plane. Lakitu is a cameraman, and the entire game is unfolding from his perspective through his camera lens. Essentially, the player is moving and seeing the world through the eyes of this character. It may be nothing more than feeling novel today, and the camera control could feel clunky, but there's a reason for this character's introduction, to help the player conceive how they should think about looking at this world. The camera shutter sound effects, the differentiation between viewing from Mario's point of view compared to the standard camera control. Every game that calls the right stick camera control does so for a reason. There's also a reason why Mario has the same core movement established in this game in recent titles like Super Mario Odyssey. The affordances given to players to express themselves with the agility and ability of this Italian plumber, be it a long jump, triple jump, or slide, are so powerful and satisfying that it's very surprising Nintendo managed to perfect this character's toolkit in a 3D space on their first go. There's a reason why nearly every 3D Mario game since has given him a gimmick to deal with rather than really mess with how he feels or controls. Seeing him take on new challenges or obstacles is what's appealing about a new adventure. Innovation is one thing and mechanics are another, but Super Mario 64 has an incredible staying power. The game has a very active community of speedrunners, streamers, game mods, custom levels, and full-on games inspired by the base mechanics of this title. If the core foundation of Super Mario 64 was not rock solid, it wouldn't be as popular. Nostalgia is a powerful thing, but it can really only carry games from the N64 so far today. Just look at Conker. If you played it as a kid, your imagination likely filled in some of the gaps this game presents. But today, it still can spark your imagination like it did back then. Maybe not in theory crafting about the inner workings of the castle, the L is real fountain, but instead how you can apply your skills to get through this journey, or charting the fastest path through Peach's castle. You can still find as much joy in Super Mario 64 as you did when it taught you what video games have to offer. And for people new to the genre that may have never experienced a 3D game before, they can still learn those lessons. So what do you think of Super Mario 64 all these years later? Did you play it growing up, discover it well after the fact, or maybe your impression is just thanks to the Nintendo DS remake of the game? Be sure to let us know how you feel about Super Mario 64 holding up today. And as always, you can stay tuned to Game Rant for more videos like this.